في القلب شعاع يهديني نور الإيمان سرى فيني.
So, after the Second Crusade, Nuruddin Zengi, the son of Imaduddin Zengi, the conqueror of Edessa, takes power in Syria. Now, he has a three-part plan. The first part is to unite the states of Syria, the states of Damascus, the states of Aleppo, Hama, Homs, Baalbek, and many, many more. Because he realizes the reunification, the liberation of the Islamic world and the liberation of Jerusalem cannot be done without the help and the unification of the Muslim leaders. The second aspect is to retake Egypt from the Fatimid Shia Caliphate. And the third step is to take Jerusalem back for the Muslims that had been taken away back in 1099 in the First Crusade. Immediately as he comes into power, he sets up institutions to ensure that he gets these goals. So in essence, he sets up an army in which to retake the states of Hama, Homs, Baalbek, and many other Syrian states. And he spends a significant amount of time to do this. But one of the most important institutions that he creates is the madrasa system, is that he takes from the old Nizami school of madrasas that was set up by Nizam al-Mulk, the former vizier of great leaders like Alp-Arslan and Malik Shah of the Seljuk Empire, the empire that had ransacked the Byzantine Empire at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071. And he takes this example and he takes this madrasa system and spreads them all across Syria. And he takes these madrasas and he tells the teachers, he tells the curriculum to make sure that they are teaching the fada'il, the purification and the greatness of Al-Quds, Jerusalem in Islam. For he understood a simple message. In order to convince the Muslim world that the liberation of Jerusalem must be undertaken, he had to first convince the Syrians, he had to first convince the Iraqis, he had to convince people of different nationalities that a city that is miles away from you must be taken for the greatness of Islam. So in these institutions, in these sort of institutions, Salahudeen, a young Salahudeen, is growing up under the mentorship of Nuruddin. In 1169, this is when Salahuddin's time comes. In 1169, his uncle Shirkuh, the commander of Nuruddin, is tasked by Nuruddin to go and take Egypt. For there is a power struggle in Egypt at this point in time. The Fatimid Khalif has a vizier named Shawar, and he is aiming to become the most powerful person in Egypt. So in a power struggle between the king of Jerusalem, Amaric I at the time, and Nuruddin's army, and Nuruddin and Shirkuh, his commander, there ensues a power struggle in which Shirkuh is able to win. Amaric returns to Jerusalem. Shawar is overtaken as the vizier of Egypt, and Shirkuh is now the vizier of Egypt and essentially the de facto leader of Egypt. The second part of Nuruddin's plan has been completed. He has united the states of Syria, and most secondly and most importantly, he has united Egypt and made Egypt as part of his empire. And these are very, very important strategic points. For if you take Syria and Egypt, not only do you have the resources, but you also have the strategic locations to hopefully take over Jerusalem one day. In 1169, Shirkuh, Salahuddin's uncle, becomes the leader of Egypt. However, 2 months later, he passes away. Now, the emirs of Egypt try and decide who will be the next leader. And they feel like they need someone that is easy to control. Al-Adid himself, the Fatimid Khalif, says that he wants someone that he could easily control. So to hopefully bring back the might of the Fatimid Caliphate back at this point in time. For he had extremely weakened. It had not been the same back in its heyday, back in the early 1900s, by early 900s. So Al-Adid, he underestimates a young man called Salahuddin, who was the second in command for Shirkuh. And they appoint Salahuddin with the aspect or with the notion that he'll be easy to control. Little did they know they deeply underestimated Salahuddin. For in 1169, when Salahuddin becomes a vizier, he immediately puts in measures to increase his power. He puts in his own family members to ensure that he is protected, and he puts measures into place to please the people of Egypt by getting rid of the unfair taxes that the Fatimid Khalif had put in previously. In 1170, opportunity arrives for Salahuddin to increase his power base. There are even assassination attempts within the Egyptian court to try and remove him from power. Yet he is protected. In 1171, Nuruddin orders, and with the insistence of his father, orders Salahuddin to essentially turn Egypt into a Sunni state, to abolish the Fatimid Caliphate. And why was he able to do so in 1171? Is because Al-Adid, the Khalif at this point in time, had gotten an illness. It looked very, very likely that he was to pass away. And as the historians mention, that literally overnight, Egypt had turned from a Shia to a Sunni state. And in fact, Salahudeen, to ease the Fatimid Caliph's concern, did not even tell him. And, did not tell him what he had done. And he only passed away days later, not knowing that he was the last Fatimid Caliph. In 1171, he essentially becomes the protectorate of Egypt under Nuruddin. He is still under Nuruddin's name and still under Nuruddin's orders. So in 1172, he is able to expand Egypt's influence and not only take over all of Egypt, but he is also able to take over the Hijaz. In 1172, 1173, 1174, he takes parts in campaigns to take over parts of which are the Hijaz, which essentially is Mecca and Medina. He is able to now bring Mecca and Medina under his control, under not only his control, but in the name of Nuruddin. However, unfortunately, something fundamental happens in 1174. Nuruddin in Syria passes away. Now, Nuruddin is a man of greatness, a man for which there wouldn't have been no Salahudeen without Nuruddin. For as the poets used to say in Syria, that when Nuruddin falls ill, all of Syria falls ill. When Nuruddin feels good, all of Syria feels good. The people loved him for his mercy, for his piety. Nuruddin was a man in which Ibn al-Athir mentions, a very famous chronicler of the Crusades, who mentions of Nuruddin, and he says that Nuruddin was a man that after the great Khulafa Rashidun, after the Anbiya, after the prophets themselves and the Khulafa Rashidun, there was no man greater than Nuruddin Zengi, for his piety was well known. For example, in a certain case where he told his wife that his wife was given 3 shops, and he's in these 3 shops. He told his wife, this is the only money you will get. This is the only money you will earn from these 3 shops. Whatever you earn from these 3 shops, these are yours. When at one point the 3 shops were not doing well enough, his wife came up to him and says, "Look, we need more. And what did Nuruddin say to his wife? Nuruddin said that this is all I can give you. For the money that is in my possession is not mine, but it is the money of the Ummah. And I am a trustee of this Ummah." This was the sort of man Nuruddin was. This is the man that created the madrasa systems to instill the love of Jerusalem to people. And this is the institutions in which Salahuddin grew up in. In 1174, it seemed like the only ideological heir was Salahuddin. Yet unfortunately, all the work that Nuruddin had done to reunite Syria, the city-states of Baalbek, Hama, Homs, and Damascus, was unfortunately all undone. For as soon as he passed away, all of his family members tried to take parts of the different parts of Syria. Because his son and heir was only 11 years old at this time. His name was Al-Salih. He was only 11 years old at this time, and of course an 11-year-old cannot rule over a state as vast as Syria. So he is appointed a regent, a man called Gumashtekin. And what Gumashtekin initially does is he takes Salih, the son of Nuruddin, to Aleppo. And the governor of Damascus is worried, because he's worried that now all the other family members of Nuruddin is now going to try and take Damascus. There is now the ruler of Mosul to worry about. There is now the leader of Aleppo to worry about, and the other city-states. So immediately the governor of Damascus seeks Salahuddin's help. Salahuddin is watching all of this from afar, but he doesn't want to take part, for he doesn't want to do anything to Nuruddin's empire unless it is for the sake of Islam. And he uses this letter as an excuse that the governor of Damascus is asking me to come and help him. So the governor of Damascus sends a letter to Salahuddin. Salahuddin takes his initiative, and he then marches with 700 horsemen to Damascus. And in Damascus, he is welcomed in open arms. There are celebrations across the streets, for they know who Salahuddin, the people of Damascus know who Salahuddin is. They know him as a man of piety, a man of justice, and they welcome him into the city. Salahuddin now has Damascus as part of his empire, as part of his lands. And now he spends the next 17 years. Know this, brothers and sisters, that Salahuddin spends more time fighting his fellow Muslims than he does the Crusaders. We know Salahuddin as the great liberator of Jerusalem, but we also must remember him as the great man that reunified the Muslim world, despite different factions, despite different kingdoms, despite different people that only cared about their different aims. In 1174, he is now the leader of Damascus. In 1175, he has to deal with the leaders of Aleppo, Saifuddin al-Ghazi, and the leader of Mosul at this point in time as well. And it gets so bad to a point where these leaders really do not want Salahuddin fighting him, where they even hire assassins. And in fact, this is where the famous assassin order, the Hashashin, which a lot of people know to have inspired the classic video game series Assassin's Creed, where they hire assassins to kill Salahuddin. They even pay the Crusaders to attack Salahuddin's lands in order for Salahuddin not to have the time to attack the states of Aleppo and Mosul. It was only until 1181 where Salahuddin finally has a chance to take over Aleppo and Mosul. Those are the two states that he has left. Before that, he was able to take all the other city-states that initially that Nuruddin had taken over. And in 1177, going back a couple of years, 1177, he fought. Salahuddin believed that he had enough forces to hopefully take that chance and liberate Jerusalem. However, in 1177, he meets the Crusaders in a battle called the Battle of Montgisard. Unfortunately, he suffers a massive loss, with many of his soldiers dying, and he is able to just run away. And he realizes from this defeat that he cannot take over Jerusalem without the retaking of the vital city-states of Aleppo and Mosul, which were two of the most powerful states at this time. In 1181, advantage reaches him. In 1181, Saifuddin al-Ghazi passes away, the leader of Mosul who had previously sent an army to fight Salahuddin to preserve his power base. And what happens is that his successor is not as strong as Saifuddin al-Ghazi. And in essence, between 1181 and 1183, he is finally able to take over Aleppo. So Syria is now entirely under his command. In 1185, he comes to a peace agreement with the leader of Mosul at this time, and he is able to also take Mosul under his command as well. Mosul becomes a vassal state in which the leader is Imaduddin would remain the ruler of that state, but would call upon Salahuddin whenever he needed. That when Salahuddin called upon him, he will come and help him. 1185, he is able to finally reunify the Islamic world, and this finally gives him a chance to take and build an army to finally take on the Crusaders and take back his much coveted prize, which is the Kingdom of Jerusalem. We now need to go back to the year 1181 for what is happening in the Kingdom of Jerusalem at this point in time. In 1181, there are divisions happening within the Crusader kingdom itself. In the same way that the Muslim world is divided, the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem is also becoming divided. In 1181, Amaric I, the famous leader that had taken a chance at Egypt, had died, and his son Baldwin IV, a very famous Crusader king, had taken over power. He was known as the leper king or the mask king, for he used to wear a mask because he used to suffer from leprosy, and he did not want people to see his scars. Did not want people to see his disfigurement. And despite that, he was an effective leader. In 1185, unfortunately, he passes away. And in essence, his son, Baldwin V, is only at this point around in his infancy. He's still around 7 to 8 years old. And there becomes a battle within the court of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, where they want to decide who the next king is. Baldwin IV's sister, his name is Sibylla. And eventually, after a lot of intrigue, a lot of discussions, Guy of Lusignan, the husband of Sibylla, becomes the king of Jerusalem in 1185. And Salahuddin needs a reason to conquer Jerusalem. For in all of this time that he was trying to reunify the Islamic world, he could not fight on two fronts. He needed to come up with a peace treaty with the Crusaders. In 1180, he sought a peace treaty with the Crusaders, the County of Tripoli, and the Kingdom of Jerusalem, to ease hostilities while Salahuddin dealt with Aleppo and Mosul. In 1183, however, he received an opportunity, a literal opportunity, to hopefully be able to give him a chance and to be able to get out of that truce and try and take Jerusalem. I'm going to introduce you a man called Reynold of Chatillon. Reynold of Chatillon was a fitna maker in the crusading world. Even his own fellow Christians, his own fellow Crusaders would not want to claim him, for they themselves claimed that Reynold of Chatillon was a man of greediness, a man of wickedness, and a man that only cared of bloodshed. And despite that, the Crusaders still claimed him because he was one of theirs. And in Reynold of Chatillon, what he did in 1183 is that he had control over a fortress city called Karak. And in this fortress city, unfortunately, was in a place which the Hajj pilgrims had to go through. In order to go from Damascus or any part in Syria towards Mecca and Medina, you had to go through the fortress of Karak. And it is this man that Reynold of Chatillon he had control over. And what he would often do was that he would raid these caravans. And in stories that are mentioned in the biographies of Salahudeen and the biographies of the Crusades, is that this is what he would do, is that he would capture these pilgrims. He would send them to the dungeons in his fortress in Karak, dirty dungeons with rats, dirt, feces, all across the dungeon. And before he would kill these prisoners, before he would kill these pilgrims, he would put a knife, he would put a sword on their necks, and he would say, "Where is your Muhammad? Where is your Muhammad to protect you? Where is your Allah who will protect you?" And when Salahudeen first heard of this, he raised his hand, and Imaduddin Isfahani and Ibn Shaddad, his biographers, both mentioned this, is that he raised his hands up in the sky and said, "I will kill this man with my own hand." He made an oath to do this. And in 1183, he went even further. In 1183, he sends a naval force to go through the Red Sea to attack Mecca and Medina with the purpose of desecrating the Prophet ﷺ's grave, taking over the Kaaba, destroying the Kaaba, taking the body of the Prophet ﷺ, taking it back to Karak, in which he claimed he would charge the Muslims to see it. Again, when Salahudeen heard of this, he immediately raised his hand and made the same oath that he made years before. And thankfully, he sent a naval force led by a man called Husamuddin al-Lu'lu to attack Reynold of Chatillon's naval forces. Reynold of Chatillon, unfortunately, was able to escape, but in something that was quite surprising to even Salahudeen's commander. Salahuddin ordered that all the men that were involved in this naval fleet to go attack Mecca and Medina were to be executed. And even then, when this order was given, his brother, who was there at the time, Husamuddin al-Lu'lu as well, they were surprised at this command. This is mentioned by historians of Salahuddin's motivations, because normally he was a man who would let prisoners go. He was a man that would that would give prisoners ease and kindness. But in this circumstance, Salahuddin had no mercy. He said that Salahuddin ordered for them to be executed. And initially these commanders did not carry out the order, but they were so surprised at this order, for they knew their commander. So they sent a letter to Salahuddin to reconfirm, is this your actual order? So Salahuddin sends a letter back saying, I have given these orders for two practical reasons. One practical, one personal. One practical because these raiders, if we let them go, they will continue to make these raids again and again. And the second is personal, for the honor of Islam has been hurt, and these men do not deserve to live. So these orders were given and they were executed. Despite this, because Salahuddin is fighting on multiple fronts, he still makes a truce with Raymond of Tripoli, the Count of Tripoli at this time, that the Crusaders were not going to fight with the Muslims. In 1186, when Aleppo and Mosul is now under the control of Salahuddin, Salahuddin needs to find an opportunity to take upon an army to fight the Crusaders. In 1186, he finds this opportunity, for yet again Reynold of Chatillon again finds a reason to break this treaty. In 1186, Reynold of Chatillon yet again destroys and kills members of an innocent caravan of people that were on their way to the Hajj. And again, Salahuddin again makes the same oath that he had made 2 times before. And he said that I am going to do whatever I can. And this gave him an excuse to break the truce. For the Crusaders had backed what Reynold of Chatillon did. Whilst Raymond of Tripoli himself admitted to Salahuddin that he did not approve of what Reynold did, Reynold was still on the Crusader side and he had to claim them. And in that essence, Salahuddin had finally had the reason to finally create that big decisive battle, in which Ibn al-Athir mentions that after all the early great battles of Islam, there was no other great battle than the Battle of Hittin of 1187.